Hey guys, welcome back to the Mind Body broadcast with Austin and Marty. And today we're going to talk about advancements in or within our industry, or lack of advancements in some cases, within supplementation, within just nutrition, training, science, all of those things. We know now there's this big push from the evidence-based crowd, or even more dramatically from the science-based crowd. You have the crowd that kind of falls in between, which is Austin, myself and Marty. We came in at a time that we can kind of pull from both the practical application side of things and the science side of things. We have so much science at our fingertips now, PubMed, published articles. It's literally you can find a study for just about anything you want to find a study for. And you can also find a study that probably refutes anything that you want to find a study for as well. So that's kind of where we come in the middle, and we want to talk about some things that advance and some things that haven't.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that you said that about how we were kind of in the middle there, because you said you're turning about 28 here in a month, and I am going to be 33 here in 2 weeks. Well, yeah, happy birthday early to me. So, right. And where I went to get a lot of my information, I know you did too, was to forums. Back in the day, it was message board. It was forums. There was one, the great ones. I'll give some shout out to the ones that really helped shape me and my career were Intense Muscle, Skip's website with Dante Trudell was on there. Pro Muscle, if you sifted through it, had a lot of great posters on there. To a lesser degree, Muscle Mayhem I enjoyed. There was a lot. Even bodybuilding.com, if you go way back when I think I signed up as Marty McFly in 2002. Believe that, kids. And Alan Aragon was posting on there. Lane was posting on there. I think I saw Eric Helms on the body recomposition boards back then. So there was these researchers that were on there, and they're providing good information. Now, I'm not by no means going to say there was not junk information out there, because there definitely was there too. But it was just, if you were to pay attention to who was saying certain things, even though, yes, it was potentially just some nameless person that had just had a handle. But if you got to know who they were and you got to know their avatar, that they were either a successful contest prep coach or they were someone that was in the evidence-based or research community, you could kind of pick these people out. But now, I would say if I was to be 18, even so when I started looking into this stuff, I was 15. So going like being a 15 to 18-year-old male or female trying to sift through stuff now, I would say it would be daunting as all life, just daunting, straight up, because thanks to either Facebook or even just the different marketing angles out there, different everything out there, there are some good Facebook groups, or we'll call them Facebook message boards, even like Joe Jeffrey has a good one, which is Optimal Physique Development. Hi, Joe. Thanks for putting out good info. But even to that degree, there's not a lot of great info on training or on nutrition in a sense of a collective, like as in, here is how to start out for your nutrition. Here is how to start out for your training, because that's what obviously coaches do. And I know that Austin would have read a lot of the same textbooks and a lot of the same science that I have, which makes us who we are and makes our career paths very valuable. But to jump on in there, that you are going to find, just like you said, how you could find a study for yay of your opinion or nay of your opinion. It's your choice to believe that. If you were to look just up for, like, let's say, to use an example of a keto group, ketogenic diet group, you are going to find like keto is the devil group, and you're going to find a keto is Jesus group. And depending upon where you jump in, you're not going to probably get the we'll say the other side of the coin on this stuff, which can, as I said, make it very daunting. Whereas so that would be the younger part of the, we'll say, the growing up in trying to learn the fitness industry now, that kind of even 15 to 20 years old. Whereas we'll say that the 40 plus, like you said, they had more of just the in the trenches, or they had the magazine articles, and that was kind of it. They probably didn't even have the message boards then, and they just had, oh, well, that guy's big in the gym, let's ask him what to do, or that girl's lean, that girl looks great with a nice set of glutes, let me ask her what to do. Whereas there is I believe that you are correct, that the hybrid lies and the correct approach lies in the middle, in between being completely in a lab coat and science-based, and then completely head down, I've only worked out and haven't looked at any science. There is a happy medium in there, and that's why this is going to be a super good episode, thanks to it being the advancements or lack thereof in the industry and what we've seen, what we've tried over the years, and what has panned out and what hasn't.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think the way that I always sum it up in really simple terms is science, anything that we're seeing in a study now, somebody has already done. Why? Because, well, they wanted to see why it's happening. The articles, this published research, it's more or less showing why something is happening that we already know is happening. So does that make sense? Yeah. So we're doing, why does this amount of volume produce more hypertrophy than this amount of volume? Well, someone's already been doing it, so they got curious and they wanted to do a study on it. 9 times out of 10, there isn't a lot of research that is completely 100% brand new. No one's ever done it before. Research. And then, and to your point also about, finding research that supports and doesn't support your opinion, people gravitate towards, what they want to gravitate towards. People are going to gravitate towards what suits their opinion. That's human nature. If you can kind of get past that bias, obviously you're going to be a lot better off and probably a lot better educated, but it really just lies in, it really all does lie in application. So, like you said, the information's there, but it's just very daunting for people to know, how do I apply it? What do I do with it? Is this correct? Is this not correct? And you're never really going to know those things without experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the exact direct term that's called confirmation bias is like if you read 5 studies saying that creatine ethyl ester is superior to creatine monohydrate, but you ignore the 50 studies saying that creatine monohydrate is either superior or exactly the same, that's confirmation bias. That just means you're ignoring everything else that's kind of out there. And unfortunately, this is a little bit of a problem within the evidence-based or the research-based community right now, in a sense of if I go in and I really believe in dog crap training in terms of I believe in low volume, high intensity, and high frequency trainings, and I believe in rest pause sets, and I go into looking at any training studies, I am going to look with that through those blinders, and maybe I'll see something that says, oh, high volume with high intensity, it could be better for you, and I'll immediately kind of push that aside. So the advancements that we're seeing in training, I would say, are probably the most lackluster out of all the advancements that we see. And what I mean by that is it's so frigging hard to suffer. Yeah, I should say suffer through, to sift through the information that's out there and come back with something that's valid. And the reason why that is, and if any of you are interested in being a PubMed warrior or taking a look at science and taking a look at studies out there, the abstract, which is the summary, it's called the abstract, is not going to give you every last drop of the information. And then you need to be able to know how to interpret these papers correctly. And I will flat out tell you, I used to know how to read this stuff from taking chemistry and psychology in university. And a lot of it kind of went away in terms of my superior interpreting skills. And I've had to let other people such as like Joe, my friend Reeves, and a couple others be able to interpret these for me, because the abstract could say, okay, 10 to 15 reps has been showing now to be the optimal range for hypertrophy. And I go, okay, cool. But then you go look at the study and it was men with low testosterone ages 70 to 85. Well, that's not me. That's not a healthy, young, moderately advanced bodybuilder. That's not me. So that study isn't really applying that hard to me. And then again, there's something called the parameters. Like, were they training 3 times a week? Were they training 4 times a week? Were they doing just one leg exercise? Were they doing squats? Was it doing leg extensions? All of this stuff friggin' matters, but it also doesn't matter. I know I'm going to go counter coin to what I just said there, but my whole point is that there is the training advancements in terms of the last, what do we want to go with, since 2000, since the 90s to now. Let's go with the last 20 years has been there, but also not. And I really like that you said that there. It's kind of I think we said this before we started recording. It's kind of coming full circle. Whereas oh, you did say this. Why we are now starting to know why something is happening, but we already knew that something is happening because we were doing it and it was frigging working. right? Like one of the best guys I knew for that out there. He gets slammed a lot in the industry, and I don't know why, because a lot of his stuff he says is gold was Scott Abel. And Scott Abel had like his definitions of intensity, had his definitions of how to do something called innervation training, which was his branded version of the mind muscle connection, and all this stuff that we couldn't really study per se, that now is coming thanks to like electromagnet stimulation things. We're going, holy crap, that stuff is working, as opposed to just for the longest time believing that you have to move more weight on the bar. That is the definitive and only gauge for progress. So the last thing I'll say on that before I definitely hand it over to you was, I remember when John Meadows was up and coming, and me and him were coaching with each other, and he still had his job at the bank. And I remember seeing an email that he sent to me. He goes, Marty, there's ways to progress outside of just adding more weight and just progressive resistance. And I remember being a young man when we were talking to each other, I think 2009, 2010, I was like, I knew there was, because I would, do these back off sets that weren't a really heavy set of 8 or a really heavy set of 6. And I was doing something like a Widowmaker set is what it's called, like a set of 20 for squats. And like, holy crap, this shit worked. So now we're like you said, we're starting to find out that there are more ways to skin a cat in that sense. But in terms of full-on training advancements, I would say it would be the most lackluster in terms of outside of nutrition, outside of supplementation, for sure.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think we've maybe learned a few things, but yeah, I mean, as a whole, I would say we probably haven't learned a lot. One thing that I did get to do here recently was, we talked about that physique summit, and Brad Schoenfeld spoke there. So he's
awesome.
He's obviously, in terms of hypertrophy research, he's pretty much tops.
You know what? I'll cut you off for a quick second there, and I'll say I think he's pretty much it. I don't know anyone else that's looking at straight up hypertrophy training with the correct parameters other than him. Like, I don't know anybody else. Like, some of them are doing a little bit different, but he is the man. So definitely look up Brad Schoenfeld for sure, guys. Thanks, Austin. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you're fine. And you're right. Within the parameters, and the couple of things he talked about too were how difficult it is to obviously fund these studies because there's just not a lot of demand for it. We're within our industry. We think that it's so big, but really it's not. Like, really, we're not. In the medical community, our hypertrophy curiosity is really not something that they want to spend money on. So, but he kind of talks about, luckily there's some sponsors and things that do fund the studies. And, he speaks about parameters within the studies. Are they doing, this study showed this, but they were doing a single leg extension for 3 sets. That's all they did, in the study. So he kind of talks about take things with a grain of salt. These parameters are better than these parameters. But he was summing up at the summit in his presentation. He was summing up some of the research on rep ranges and then volume. What volume, what effect volume has on training. And so some of the things I think we maybe have learned are that volume is definitely a big driver of hypertrophy. So I think we can confidently say that, and that's assuming that there's adequate intensity. So not volume like you're just doing a 5-pound dumbbell for 100 sets. That's not going to, you're right. You're not breaking down any tissue. There's not sufficient intensity. So with sufficient intensity, we're talking, if you want to use an RPE range or whatever, a 7 or 8 at least out of 10. And then volume does become a big driver of hypertrophy. And I think that a lot of the people that have shown this being effective are in the natural crowd.
Yes.
And right, because they've really taken advantage of some of the advancements in training research because they don't have the drug component. So, of course, they have to make sure that they're doing everything they can, which, I mean, enhanced people should be as well. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. But, aside from that, some of the volume that he was talking about was pretty insane. Like some of the amounts of sets, and we're talking working sets. And some other guys talked about it too. Ryan Doris was there, Cliff Wilson.
Awesome.
I got to speak to those guys, and we were talking about just how much they're actually doing within a workout, how many sets. And it was It was quite a bit. And then in terms of the rep ranges, the rep range thing was funny. He went through all this research. He had, stuff, published studies and so on and so forth with good parameters. They took rep ranges and basically, I'm not going to try not to butcher his research.
Sure. Yep.
And he, basically volume equated in all the studies, and the people were doing the same exercises. So, controlled environment. And he found out that hypertrophy was happening relatively close to the same in all rep ranges within reason. We're talking 500 reps. We're talking, do I need to do 6 reps? Do I need to do 8 reps? Do I need to do 10, 15, 20, maybe 25? We're getting a whole lot higher than that. But essentially, all rep ranges were beneficial. So we kind of debunked the whole, you should train in this rep range. In reality, it's all rep ranges should be used somewhere in your programming. So that's kind of what I gathered from that, and then the volume component. So those are maybe a couple of the smaller things that we've learned about training, but whole, that's not anything super groundbreaking. I don't think so.
Well, you to take that a little step further, because it's wonderful that you've heard that from those guys, because it is true. From we'll say all angles, like you said, especially during if we're involved in the natural crowd, right, or the unenhanced crowd, because Brad had this meme put out, which is probably my favorite one. I have it saved. I don't know why I haven't made a post about it. I'm going to probably do that today now, where he had, what's the ideal rep range, and he had like 5 to 8, and I think then like 8 to 15, and he had like 15 plus, and it said all of them.
Right.
And I was like, it was like one of those, which one of these is best? And it said all of them, like, or like A is A best, B, C, B, and that was it. And of course it caused a shitstorm. Well, I've got the best gains off of 5 to 8, or I've got the 5 to 10 or whatever. And so I really did some thinking about this, of course, because this is the Mind Body broadcast. And what I've come up with, and this, of course, is only my own meanderings, but this is like, even though we're calling this the advancements in training, but I want to call this the advancements of training, or the differences that we have seen also anecdotally and personally, just because it's our podcast and you guys are here for us, right? Of course. So men, I know in general, from what I've seen in terms of the bodybuilding crowd, they generally enjoy kind of the 10 to 15, sometimes the 8 to 12 rep range. And I go, this is when I grow the best. And okay. And so I looked at how all these guys are doing this until I'll use Scott Abel again, just because when I was first started training with him, there were so many 20 to 25 sets of like leg press. And I was like, 25? Oh my God. Because I haven't done that in a very long time. So there I am, used to doing, let's say, 8 plates on the leg press for 10 reps, and now here I am having to take off and go like either 4 plates aside or 5 plates aside to get to 20 or 25, and it just wrecked me. And and the reason why I'm saying this is that when I got to like that rep 15, I just flat out didn't want to do it. And then got to rep 18, didn't want to do it. Get to rep 20, would do it because it was on my program. But the reason why I'm saying that is that these guys, especially the men I talked to, they didn't want to do past the 15. So therefore, that was not giving them the drive to do it. If you really like to do 12 or 10 to 15, you're probably that's going to be the rep range for you, because that's when you're going to give all your effort to. If you're not used to the 20 to 25, that's completely different from you not wanting to do a set of 20 to 25. Whereas if I have had ladies that they exactly the opposite. They don't want to put the training load up to as high as, let's say, a set of 8 or something, but now you give them a lighter load, but they still are generating a lot of intensity. And like you said, it's not a 5-pound dumbbell. It's still some weight that will elicit a resistance training program, and not it be a calisthenics program, which is just your body weight. But the women will generally gravitate towards that 20 to 25 rep range. Not saying that there aren't girls that like to lift heavy. There's lots of my girls out there that do, but they will get more results out of doing that 20 because that's their rep range inside their head that they like to do, because they don't feel that they've done enough at the 8 to 10. So that's something I would say would be more of an advancement, is looking harder into this damn psychological aspect of things. And me and you have talked about this, I don't know how many times, about how that's where the world is going, and that's where the coaching should be going, is not towards here's just your sets and reps. It's, did you enjoy this? And oh my gosh, I could talk way too much on this. If Chester Rockwell is listening to this, me and him have talked about this quite a bit. And it's like, you need to friggin' enjoy that program. If you go in there and you literally hate every exercise and hate every rep range, you are going to see junk results versus you going in, even if it's not an ideal exercise or rep range for you, but if you inside your own mind have made it optimal, you are going to get better results because you're actually enjoying doing the damn workout.
Yeah, you're right. And it's funny you bring up Chester, because we were having a discussion on training frequency. So that's another big one.
The dude's awesome. I mean, Chester's just, he's one of the guys that friggin' gets it for sure.
He's definitely a smart guy, but he's but very practical. You know, he understands the
yes.
but he knows how to apply it. And we had, in terms of the frequency, we had that. It's still there, but we had that like probably 2-year period where everyone thought that you had to train everything like 6 times a week.
Oh, Lord.
And I think we found out that there could be some benefits to frequency if it helps you recover better. If you, like you said, if you prefer it, maybe it's better for your nervous system. Maybe you just recover better from spreading things out, whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, my point of bringing up Chester was he's like, I prefer a bro split. You know, I prefer to do one body part, or not one body part a day, but I prefer to train each body part one time a week.
That's right.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, he's still taking the amount of volume that he wants to, you know, equate for each muscle group, and he's just doing it in one day versus spreading it out over the week. So
yeah.
In terms of the frequency, I mean, there's some conflicting stuff. I think that you could maybe make an argument that it's slightly better. I know for me personally, and this is just me, is the fact that I recover better if I do, you know, if I'm doing whatever X number. If there's 20 sets of back, I'm gonna have a more productive back workout if I split it 10 and 10 type of thing.
You got it.
But that's not necessarily the case with everyone. And so to discount the fact that somebody else might not want to do that or might do better on doing it all in one day, again, that's where the psychology comes in. That's where the application comes in. I have people that do it all different ways. That's why, you know, I get, it's funny because I do the Q&As and stuff every week, and the really broad questions like, what style diet do you prefer? Or what training frequency do you prefer? I can't even answer those. They're the easiest. They're like the most, yeah, I mean, you can give me the most detailed question, it's going to be the easiest to answer. Why? Because there's context, you know.
Yeah.
We don't have, without context and without the individual's preferences, recovery abilities, genetics, hell, their work schedule, you know. I mean, in training, for me, the more and more I do this, I understand the basic components. This person probably needs about this much volume. Maybe they can handle a little more than this person. Maybe we can build it up over time. They can handle, I know that we'll give an example, have a pretty high stress work schedule, so I'm going to have to be mindful of their nervous system. I can't push them too hard. They might only train 4 days a week with what you would call maybe I know Dr. Mike, what the hell's his last name?
Israeli?
Yeah. Because he's, you know, one of the guys that talks about minimum effective dose and talks about maximum recoverable volume. So, you know, someone that's real stressed, they might only train at that minimum effective dose. Why? Because that's all they can handle. And I post this at least once a year. I probably post it more than once a year. It's like, what's ideal in a lab setting, in a controlled setting, doesn't necessarily translate to paper. Why? Because we have a thing called life, you know. So that's kind of where I'm at with training. You know, I think that we have come up with some new things, but it's just that sometimes it's hard to apply things just from a practicality standpoint.
Yes, you got it. And so I will just very, very, very briefly sum up kind of what I was doing when I first started coaching and where I've gravitated towards, because I think that would be, we'll say, my advancement in coaching, and not only the advancement in what I've seen for the training, was I would have this you have to do strength stuff in the start. Like you have to do something like a 3x5 or a 5x5 program, which I don't necessarily believe in fully anymore, unless that's something you really want to do. I also don't believe only in the 8 to 12 or 8 to 15 rep range for hypertrophy anymore, because I've seen, especially for legs, if the guys and girls want to hit a couple sets of 20 on anything, I've seen that blow up legs way more, because then now, like you said, the CNS, it's going to, especially if you're using a lighter load, not light, but lighter load, you're not going to have as much like weight coming down on your joints and everything else as something like a 1,000-pound squat, just making it obnoxious, versus a 400-pound squat is going to be easier on the joints, less taxing on the CNS and even your own psychology behind things, the mental in terms of, I don't want to go up to the weight and feel like that. So I found people can do that a heck of a lot better. And I've also really looked into cardio, splitting it up from training, and not because it needs to be fasted cardio versus doing it after training, but I was finding that people that would do really intense workouts, and then if they wanted to do cardio afterwards, even if it was at a medium intensity state, not necessarily just a low intensity state, but something like intervals, doing high intensity intervals after a training session can be, again, like soul crushing in a sense, to try to get that same amount of caloric expenditure. So even splitting up the cardio from the weights, like even if you wanted to eat in the morning, then do your cardio, and then come back and do your training after another couple meals, it'll just refresh the tank type of thing, right? So I know that's, again, ideal, like you said, ideal versus optimal. That's what I like to say when you talked about the ideal is in the lab setting, then the optimal is what kind of works around your life. So there's that too. And then I looked into that too when I was splitting up the cardio and the training. And I love how you just said the 20 sets of back, you do the 10 and the 10. That's me too, man. That's me too, because I know that like those last 10 exercises, let's just say, or those last 10 sets, I'm not going to give it as much as if I was refreshed. Right. And I'm not saying necessarily go into 2-a-day training, but I'm saying that if you were to take your 10 of your back sets or back exercises and put them on one day, and then take them and put them on another day, then you potentially can have more gas in the tank. But that's going to be completely dependent upon, obviously, your life schedule and whatever. Not everyone's got 5 or 6 days to work out for an hour. But then again, you're just the primary driver behind what we're kind of saying here for training that has advanced and has kind of stayed there is that as long as you keep the volume, and when we say volume, like I said, the amount of exercises, the amount of weights, you keep the volume the same, but you just kind of split up the frequency. That's fine, and or going to be very person dependent. And I even kind of go into that and call it, we'll say, the need state, like in terms of, have you been doing everything in the 8 to 10 range? Maybe try out the 12 to 15 range just to see, and that could be a proper way to do. We'll say, I don't want to say muscle confusion, because that's definitely not what I'm trying to say, but we'll say the proper way to switch things up is just by trying out a different rep range, because maybe that's easier for your brain, especially because now, as Austin said, we've got the science that says it doesn't really matter as long as you keep everything kind of steady across the board. So that's it. That's kind of the summation of where my training and where my coaching of training has kind of gone, is that I like splitting up things a little bit more outside of, especially for individual preference. Volume is the primary driver in terms of total exercises and total sets, total reps per body part, and that's where I'm going to be keeping it, because all the evidence that's been coming out too is showing that.
Yeah, and I think from here you touched on cardio a little bit, and that's a good place to transition.
You got it, buddy. Go for it.
Cardio portion. I love what you said about, just for mental purposes, splitting up the cardio and the training. So one of the things I do when I'm implementing cardio, or sometimes even if it's initially when I'm building a person's program, they're doing cardio right out of the gate, or whatever the case may be, I ask a couple different questions. Are you able to do fasted cardio? Do you have cardio equipment at your home? If so, what do you have? I'm just trying to figure out, okay, when is going to be the most practical time to place cardio in there? Personally, I like splitting it. For most people, I don't split it for everyone. Maybe if they're doing steady state and HIIT within the same day or something, then obviously, doing steady state hit and a training session the same day. Well, you're not going to, if they don't have anything at home, I certainly don't expect them to make 3 trips to the gym. That's ridiculous. So, I might have something post workout, but in general, I do like the idea of trying to split it up. But aside from that, we can talk about a couple of the things that there's been the war on what kind of cardio is better. Is steady state better? Should you do it fasted? Should you not do it fasted? Is HIIT better? And so on and so forth. And I think that we've definitely, in terms of the steady state, I think that most people agree at this point that it doesn't much matter, but there are definitely situations in certain like supplementation scenarios and stuff that fasted cardio might be better. But in general, right. And that's the thing. It's funny is these people argue, well, this is strictly the application crowd, the crowd that doesn't care about the science, hasn't read the studies, whatever. They'll say, well, fasted cardio works for me. I'm like, well, that's because you have a bunch of drugs that you take in the morning and that make it work better, So it's like, you're not really, that's another context thing, it's another situational thing. So, but in general, I think we found that cardio really boils down to caloric expenditure, whether it's increasing your NEAT levels, whether it's increasing just formal cardio. And I think the NEAT level thing is pretty neat because see what they did there. It showed us when we kind of figured out how important NEAT levels were. I think that's one of the things that dawned on a lot of people that said, wait, maybe total caloric expenditure really is the most important thing because NEAT levels, they aren't done fasted. They aren't done here. They aren't done there. They're done. That's just your day in general. And we found out, well, if you burn 1,000 calories through your NEAT levels, you lose more body fat. Then how is that happening if fasted cardio is better when I'm doing all my NEAT in the middle of the day? So it's, I can't see how anyone could really argue that, the whole fasted versus non-fasted unless it's just a situation where, supplementation's coming into play.
Yeah, exactly. So there's 2 times where fasted, we'll say, can potentially be optimal and ideal. Is number 1, like you said, you are using some kind of enhancements and or goodies. We're not going to really go into that, unfortunately, because some of them do dip on the darker side of things. But I believe that either on your guys' podcast, is it Optimal? What was the podcast called, Austin? Sorry, you and Joe's.
Yeah, the OPD. We just call it OPD podcast.
OPD. That's right. The Optimal Physique podcast. I'm pretty sure you guys have gone over them there for sure. But outside of that, it is going to be there's. I'll even jump into this too. There's two other times where it's not the fasted part that's doing it, folks. It's the fact that you woke up and you had energy to do the cardio and they go, oh, fasted cardio works for me. I'm like, I bet you if you were to have food that was allotted during your schedule for the food for the day, if you were to eat and then you would do the cardio, it would elicit the same amount of fat and calorie burning as if you didn't, only because you're not doing the cardio after your hard ass training session and trying to tack your cardio on then, which is causing you to not have as much intensity for it. Just like we talked about with splitting it up. And that's where the causation is not correlation. It's not the fasted. It's the fact that you splitting it up. You're fresher. You're straight up fresher for your cardio session. And that's really what it is. But again, I remember they did that with people. I don't know if it was Alan or Eric that showed me the science behind that, but when they were doing it, they did exactly that. They had the cardio in the morning, either fasted or fed, and then had the training at the nighttime. And there was no difference at all in terms of lipolysis or what. It was so negligible, it just didn't matter. So that's it. That's the key reason for that. And I love that you mentioned the NEAT levels. I would say that's a huge advancement in terms of me, was the awareness of it and the coaching of it. Like I used to not pay attention to that as much, not ask people for that as much because I just didn't think it was valid. And this is for at least for the last 5 years, I've been really paying attention to it now. Thank gosh. because to counter argument that in a sense, I was also looking at how much people were decreasing their NEAT thanks to lower calories or being more tired or having more cardio to do. So if they were to, if I were to, let's say, take away X amount of food, let's just say 200 calories, to make it a set number. So I took away 2,000 calories, and then they were doing 200 calories less a day of NEAT. Well, now shit, we've literally negated my drop in calories. And that, and now that I know that, like even using like to some extent Fitbit, I don't usually use the calorie burning on the Fitbit. I don't see how something on your wrist can gauge your metabolism. I think it's hilarious. It's like, I wish Fitbit would, like, you know, hey, your genetic potential for biceps are 19 inches. I'd be like, yes, Fitbit, I'll buy you now. This is awesome. But outside of, but like, it is really good. Like I even use the health app on the iPhone. It will tell me how many steps I've gone. Like I would do this with some of my my carpenters or my nurses, and some of those, like they'll get to 10 to 15,000 steps during their workday, and then their off day is like 4,000. So we're looking at like 2.5 to 3 or to even 5 times as less NEAT or walking around. That's like you said, that is way more powerful than you doing 30 minutes of low intensity steady state. I would love to see someone do how many steps their low intensity steady state is. To just do that and then add it up. I'm not even going to make a guess at the number, but I'm guessing it's not going to be nowhere near 10,000. So that's the hilarious point, is that you cannot ignore that. So that's something that's definitely as advanced, is paying way more damn attention to your NEAT. And I will tell you from a coaching angle, and this is one of I call it a sneaky tactic, but it's not sneaky in the least, is just telling people, go outside for a walk, go take the kids to the park, go stop watching movies inside, go walk around the mall. And they'll go, what do you want me to do that for? I'm like, just go see if there's shoes on sale for me at this place for me. Just do something dumb, and that gets them to burn more calories, and then you're not associating it mentally with it. Oh God, it's set cardio. It's go out and do shit, and that will again keep you progressing. So that's one of the advancements too. I'll add in one last thing about cardio here, is that I really like splitting it up and or doing it fasted in the morning or not fasted, is because I have a different mindset towards cardio than I do towards training. And I'm almost certain that you do too. I've heard that you should approach cardio with the same mindset as you do with training. I disagree, because I try to make cardio be something that's productive for myself. And what I mean by that is I will either listen to the Mind Body broadcast, shameless self-plug on our own podcast, or I'll listen to various other audiobooks or listen to other podcasts, because now I go, okay, here is some Marty time that I can use for some damn learning. I'm not looking at it like, oh, frig, I've got to do another X amount of whatever cardio. No, I will go and say, okay, I've got this set up to do this. I'm going to whatever. Even you, I think you've done some cardio Q&A Instagram stuff or whatever. Like there's tons of stuff you can do. And yes, I know intervals you can't pay attention to a book or whatever, like a physical copy of a book or whatever. But as long as it's not during the interval session, even then, I could not listen and learn an audiobook during an intense set of 12 on the bench press. It's not going to happen. But now during cardio, yes, I can suck up that information and then just really mind shift it towards this is a set thing for me in terms of a double whammy of it being productive, because now I got my damn cardio in, but now I actually learned something for my day.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I mean, it's like and I'm sure there's a lot of people that do the same thing, and that's one of the reasons I like to use a stationary bike for my cardio, is because I can sit my damn laptop on it.
Exactly. Yep.
If I need to. So it's funny you mentioned the NEAT levels, and then mentioned how the steady state cardio really makes no difference. As I talk about, or in terms of like the 30 minutes of cardio is going to be so many steps or whatever.
Yeah.
I literally have people that I use only steps with. That's not everyone. So if any of my clients are listening and I don't use it with you, there's probably a reason.
Yep.
It's situational, but I do have people that I use only steps with, that just, people that may just have a really inconsistent schedule. That I know they're going to have extremely varying NEAT levels. So I'm going to say, okay, we're just going to count it in steps. That way, if you do need to go outside and walk to get your steps in, you're going to have to do so. But, I also have people that I do have, we're going to do X amount of cardio today. and X amount of cardio tomorrow and what have you. And I may have talked about this last year. I don't remember. I did a couple things in prep with my own prep with a couple other people, and this year and last year, where I had some people with like just wacky schedules that just couldn't spend an hour doing a cardio session. Maybe there's somebody that just has to get a lot of cardio in prep. Inevitably, they can't avoid it. They're doing, these people are doing they're the 90 plus minute, maybe 2 hour crowd. I had people doing cardio like before every single meal. And it worked exactly the same. I tried it myself. I was like, okay, let's see if I take 90 minutes of cardio and I split it up and I have 4 meals or 5 meals or whatever, and I do X amount between every single meal, let's see what happens. And it didn't make any difference because I tried it one day and then flipped the other day right back to 60 morning and 30 evening. It literally made no difference whatsoever.
You got it.
In my weight for the day or anything, in the way I looked or anything like that, other than maybe my digestion between the meals was better with a little bit of activity. But yeah, point being, get it done when you can get it done. If there are situations where you can split it up and it's going to help you better, perform better in the gym or perform better during the cardio session, then do that. Communicate with your coach on those things. And I think that's a good segue into a little bit of chatter on the HIIT cardio, because it is a little more performance based, well, a lot more performance based, so and I've run into this before where I'm just not noticing much return on the HIIT sessions, and come to find out that the people are doing it at a time during the day where they just can't generate any intensity. And they're not getting any benefit because, they're not getting the heart rate. You know what I mean? They're not getting any kind of lactic acid, not hitting that threshold. They're not getting that EPOC effect from their training, that afterburn effect. So it's really pointless at that point. So I would say the psychological part is even more critical with HIIT cardio, because you do need to be able to perform during those sessions. And I could even go as far as to say that I've had situations where people are so beat up in prep that I just ditch HIIT completely and we do all steady state, because the HIIT's worthless at that point. And not only is it worthless, but it's also cutting into their training.
Yeah, buddy. There we go. I knew you were going to say it. That's perfect.
Right. And I'm kind of one of those people. Like, I did it the whole prep this year, but we did cut it out at a certain point. But there's been other preps where it's been cut out earlier, and there are other preps where I didn't do it at all, just because it's more like a nervous system thing. Your nervous system, you're looking at a HIIT session's a little more like a training session. Obviously, it's a lot shorter, but it is more CNS taxing. So yeah, if you can't generate intensity during your HIIT sessions for whatever reason, then they're kind of worthless.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love that you said that little bit about the whole splitting the cardio up. That it would be, I'll go right back to cardio here, but in terms of a nutrition advancement, the whole not having to eat every 2 to 3 hours, like in terms of that was a commandment almost. Like, that was set in stone to stoke the metabolism. This is 1990s and 2000. Like, that's what everybody did, and there was no scientific evidence out on that, I don't think, at all. But either way, and then I remember my own story was I would use to personal train for so long during the day. I would maybe have breakfast and then maybe sneak a meal in between, like some clients from like 2 to 3 p.m. if I even had that. And then I have to combine about 3 meals at nighttime. And guess what? The results were the same. So in terms of you having to have these 5 to 7 meals a day, no, you don't have to. And that, like, because like, as you said, you saw the same difference with the splitting up the cardio versus the not. I saw the same difference with the splitting up of the food versus not. Outside, yes, of course, if you're using some form of nutrient timing program for like an intra-workout, or if there's various enhancements in there, sure. But in terms of almost everybody else, it's so negligible, right? Unless you're looking at like, I don't know, anything in terms of like a blood glucose situation or whatever. Even so, it's something that has come a long way, that you don't need to worry if you're an office worker and you're looking to gain or lose weight. If you miss a meal, you worrying that you missed that meal is doing way more damage than you actually missing the meal and just making it up later. Like for that, I love that you said that there's the cardio difference and then the nutrition difference too. So going back to the cardio, is that you said exactly intervals. Those intervals on the people you're talking about, they go from being high intensity intervals to intervals, which just means a little bit different of a speed between the two of them. So if they used to do 10.0 on the elliptical for resistance or speed, now they're doing 7.5, 8.0, and then that's not going to be able to generate the same amount of calorie burning. Obviously, you nailed it entirely. And then going to the recovery aspect too, I have one of my girls prepping for her show here in October. Hi, Celine, who was doing intervals after her leg day. And it just wiped her. She's like, I can't do it, Marty. It's not even close to the same intensity as my other days. Can we split it up? And I said, Celine, there was nowhere on there, and it was it was kind of both of our faults in a sense. I said, Celine, there's nowhere on there that says you have to do intervals after a leg day. I said, definitely split it up for sure. Don't even do cardio after your leg day. Let your damn legs recover, especially if you're bringing it that hard, because that you nailed it. That's perfect. Not only that, but then that's going to dip into recovery. And it could potentially even dip into atrophy. If you're like, let's say I've seen like these nightmare stories, and I literally mean by nightmare stories, because it would be one of my nightmares, is 60 minutes of intervals, 60 minutes where they're doing either some form of 10 to 30 seconds on to 10 to 30 seconds off. I'm like, how the hell are you doing that longest? It is hilarious. It's hilarious to think about. I'm like I want to see how fast or how intense that 45th minute of an interval is. Please and thank you. In Austin, it's everywhere here. They'll be like, oh yeah, and let alone go doing more than 4 times a week of intervals, let alone these, we'll call them full hour intervals or whatever, for every day of the week. I'm like, how do you have any leg tissue left? Because or how are you walking without severe cramps, severe edema, severe anything? But so for sure, and that's something again to pay attention to, is if you're not recovering. Like all of a sudden, if you're recovering, your recovery goes from being very good to, as in you're tight and sore, your DOMS, your delayed onset muscle soreness is okay, but it goes to, holy crap, I feel like I've been bulleted over by a train for a couple days after each leg session, or it dips into, I feel like I've been bulleted over after a high intensity interval session like I did a leg day. Something's got to give for sure, because now we're going way out of just calorie burning, which is usually the point of cardio for us fat loss lovers, and now we're dipping into inadequate recovery on leg training sessions.
Yeah, and you can really, what we said about the differences and about the recovery issues and the schedule issues, right there, that answers the question, what's better, HIIT or steady state? Because that's always, of course, that's always another argument. That's which is better. Well, in reality, probably a combination of both probably lies in there somewhere. But at the end of the day, it's going to be schedule related, recovery related, related to just what you can generate intensity doing. So yeah, I mean, I don't think I have a whole lot else to say on the HIIT topic. I mean, it's not, the only thing I would probably say is there's definitely some different ways that you can perform HIIT that might, that have probably changed a little bit. I know that traditionally HIIT was thought of as we're going to do intervals on the stationary bike or whatever. I know now I've definitely, at least me personally, I definitely branched out a lot when it comes to HIIT, just for the practicality part of it. I did almost all of my HIIT in this previous prep with the battle ropes.
Yep.
And the reason being is because I was doing so much damn steady state that, my legs just hurt all the time. So, if your legs feel like concrete, then of course you're not going to generate a lot of intensity. So yeah, I mean, I even have people do things like, I call them metabolic circuits, where I'll literally take, I'll take a few different exercises and group them together in the way that's still going to elicit that heart rate effect and the same effect as a traditional just bike sprint, but it's not as boring. It's a little bit of variety, does the same thing. It doesn't beat up just your legs or just your shoulders or just your arms. It actually spreads things out a little bit. So I know you having some of that,
Yeah.
following Scott Abel and doing a lot of his practices too. I know he's huge on that. I know he'll metabolic circuit you to death. I don't know if that's exactly the term he uses, but I know he's very big on that.
Yep, he literally calls it metabolic training or circuits, right? And that was the only thing I was going to add into that in terms of, because I'm remembering what the topic is, right? Advancements. And so I would say the advancements, it definitely in high intensity interval training, is getting out of the just on a cardio machine, like even like especially we could say even using different machines. Like I remember you mentioned during our cardio episode that you would do the rower. Like that's excellent. You know what I mean? You can do high intensity intervals on a rower. You can do, and I love that you mentioned the circuits, because that's exactly it. You're not going to, you can even, I make them glorified intense boot camps whereas you're, so now people are like, oh, is that not a workout? Well, no, not if you're used to squatting 200 pounds and now you're using either your body weight or like 30 pounds. No, your body's not going to see that as the same kind of stimulus. It is going to be a little bit more on the CNS than, let's say, low intensity steady state, but you're getting that so much greater calorie burn in that shorter amount of time. It depends upon the recovery, whatever, for sure. And then even what I did, going back to Scott again, like I can't thank the guy enough, but is using ab circuits too. Like as in, if you get like, you do something called like a sit out, you do like ball rolls, you do whatever, that will get you going, as opposed to just doing a set of crunches and taking a break. Like you can get, like your abs are one of those funny muscles that can be like trained from twisting angles from multiple different, we'll say, intensities. So even doing 10 minutes or 15 minutes of abs and then adding in a circuit at the end, or even doing that as your high intensity interval portion and then jumping on the treadmill after that. There are multiple ways now that we are finding the science is kind of giving us the thumbs up, along with it's more accepted now that as opposed to just doing them on a machine, like you said. I completely agree.
It's one more thing I'll add to that, and this was really cool. I was glad I found it. I was sifting through, I didn't remember what I was looking for, but this was actually a published study on HIIT cardio, but what they were talking about was the psychological preferences and abilities to generate intensity based on preferences. And they found that it was, I think the subjects in the study were a younger group of females and an older group of females. I can't remember the age. I want to say the older ones were maybe in their 50s or 60s, and then the younger ones probably 20s or 30s. Whereas they found the older group had a lot less benefit from the HIIT cardio, just because they didn't like to do it because they were older and it was harder, and so they generated less intensity. Whereas if they took the older group and they forced them to do it, you know what I mean? Like they forced them to do it, they could generate the intensity, but on their own they wouldn't. So again, that's another thing. Hey, it looks good in the lab, but it doesn't work in real life. We've all seen things like the Wingate tests in the lab, videos of that, like Ben Bukolski and other people doing those Wingate tests. Well, if you can generate that kind of intensity, Wingates are awesome. I use like a modified Wingate style HIIT with a lot of people, and they're freaking brutal. We're talking, I'm starting people with like 3 intervals, that's, and we might ramp up to 5 or 6 or so, but 3 intervals, and you're just, the lactic acid and just the excruciating pain it's immense. So, so again, guys, cardio really just comes down to schedule, how it coincides with your training in terms of recovery, what you prefer psychologically, also time, what your NEAT levels are like. So all of those things. I mean, there is a lot more to consider than you would think.
Absolutely. Yeah. I that's summing it up entirely. Like you said about how you could only do it for a certain amount of period. Like just going back to what I said about the crazy 45 or 60-minute intervals. If you're doing high intensity intervals correctly, there is no way you're making it to that kind of generation. If you're going to do them correctly, you're just going to top out at that 15-20 minute maximum mark, and then you're going to need something a lot less intense, or just you're going to keep spinning your wheels in more literally spinning your wheels on the bike in the wrong way.
Yeah, I agree. And Guys, we're actually going to split this into 2 episodes. We have another advancement episode coming at you next time where we will cover nutrition and supplementation. I feel that those 2 things go together very well. So we're grouping our training and cardio and nutrition and supplementation in part 2 of the advancement episodes. So keep an eye out for these.
Yeah, exactly. That's going to be great. And so thank you for listening again from Austin Marty at the Mind Body Broadcast, and pay attention for episode 2.